Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and for some of you, good evening. It's our pleasure to welcome viewers from across the globe to the third session of Motors Academy Forbes webinar series. My name is Chenon, and with me, I have Daniela. We'll be your host for today's session. And we are very excited to present to you the continuation of our webinar series that involves the topic of the journey from prototyping to commercialization of rehabilitation technologies.
Thanks, Chinon. I'm excited to be hosting with you today as we enter to our final series for the year in this very relevant topics, especially for MedTech companies. We've completed 2 webinar sessions on September last month, and today we have 2 important speakers on the panel that will be sharing their experiences in the market access strategy for medical devices, especially the rehabilitation technology.
So without further delay, let's welcome our speakers. Joining us on our panel today, we have Dr. Angela Smalley and Mr. Robin Toorneman. We'll introduce each speaker in more detail before each of their presentations. And as a reminder, we will leave the Q&A to the end. Please type any questions in the Q&A box below, and we'll try our best to get our speakers to answer them live.
So first up, we have Dr. Angela Smalley. Dr. Smalley holds a PhD in rehabilitation science from the University of Buffalo. Her research emphasis is on the impact of orthosis on the biomechanics of gait, posture, and balance. She also has extensive clinical experience in settings like sports medicine, orthopedics, orthotics, and prosthetics. And she has been instructor of biomechanics, exercise science, and functional anatomy at the graduate and undergraduate levels. Currently, Dr. Smalley leads the Commercialization Strategy arm of Simbex, a medical device and consumer health product design and development company in the US. She provides strategic consultants to biomedical technology innovators that bring their product to the market. During her work at Simbex, she has been involved in several NIH-funded initiatives, the Driven Accelerator Hub, in the Center for Translation of Rehabilitation Engineering Advances in Technology, also known as TREAT. She leads also medical device educational programs, including the TREAT Commercialization Advancement Cohort, an online group learning opportunity for medical device entrepreneurs. When not working, Dr. Smalley enjoys spending time doing pottery, gardening, and stand-up paddling. So Dr. Smalley will present on the American market for medical devices, and I will pass the floor to her.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. All right, so our topic today is reimbursement, specifically reimbursement for the US market. Why do we care about reimbursement? The number one answer is because it is one of the things that limits the access to innovation, and it can act as an innovation bottleneck. Very often, innovators, when they're thinking about their new idea, think about the idea itself, and reimbursement is one of the things that they forget to think about until this product is already on the market. And when you're trying to figure it out in retrospect, you realize that there are a lot of hidden rules that sneak up on you. And they act as limiters. And what you can see in this little illustration is that only some of the small ideas are getting all the way through to the patient. The larger shapes are not making it through, and that is pretty representative of if someone has something that makes a major change in the system, it's very hard to get through to the patient. Because reimbursement is hard to understand, it often is procrastinated and not thought about until the last minute, which can be harmful to the overall process. One of the reasons that people procrastinate when thinking about reimbursement is that it's complicated. There are several places where money exchanges hands. In the US healthcare system, the patient's insurance is often sponsored by their employer. So money exchanges hands between the patient and the employer for their coverage. And they together figure out how much they're going to pay to the insurance company. The insurance company holds the money until such time as when the patient actually needs treatment. And then the insurance company pays the provider, the healthcare provider who's giving the treatment. And the patient usually also provides a little bit of out-of-pocket money. Now, the provider is the person who is hopefully going to get paid by this system. But again, the provider is not 100% assured that they're going to receive the money from the insurance company. And as a result, they often will overbill or bill at a higher level because there are some patients who eventually won't pay or their insurance companies will deny. So because of the opportunity for all of these areas where money exchanges hands, there's confusion, there's delay, and there's mistrust that happens between the three parties. And this leads to a lot of frustration, especially for those of us in industry who are trying to figure out a streamlined way for the money to flow between the patient and their insurance and the provider. This is not my analogy, but it's a common one when people are talking about reimbursement. It's often described as a three-legged stool. And you need each of these three components to be working in order for reimbursement to be successful. If any one of these components is not working, then this bottleneck is in effect and the innovation can't make it all the way to the patient. The first leg of the stool is coding. In the US, there are different organizations that own the different parts of the healthcare coding system. The American Medical Association is one of the main owners of the coding system, and they control the CPT coding structure, which stands for the Common Procedural Terminology. This is a private organization. It's run primarily by physicians, and they make the decisions of which codes make it into the code list every year. Coding is essentially the language of reimbursement. We talked about how the money exchanges hands between those three parties. And in order for that to happen smoothly, they have to be able to communicate electronically with each other. The coding system makes that easy and simple. If you have a code that describes the procedure that you're offering to a patient, then it's very easy to submit through the coding process. But if you have something new that you're offering that is newer than the coding system and you don't have essentially the language to explain it, then you have to describe what process you're going through for that patient instead of just using a nice, efficient little code. So that's the first way that your coding can limit innovation. The code lists are updated about once per year, but it's sort of like the dictionary. It doesn't keep up with the most modern idioms. And so if you have something that is newer than the most recent code list, that's where you usually run into trouble. The next leg of the stool is coverage. Coverage is the decision that an insurance company makes about whether they will or will not pay for the procedure. In the US, the largest insurer is actually a government organization called CMS, which stands for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And they pay for just about half of all healthcare spending. Because they are the largest provider, they typically set the rules and then everybody else follows what they do. The nice thing about CMS being a public service is that they are very transparent with what they cover and why. And that means that you can do research ahead of time to see what CMS thinks about this particular procedure or device that you're trying to get covered. That's also the reason why the private insurance companies use this as their standard to follow, because it is set sort of as an available source of information for them. CMS has a phrase that they use, sort of a catchphrase, where they will only pay for something if they determine that it is reasonable and necessary. And they have yet to fully define what they mean by reasonable and necessary, but they use this as their reason for rejecting things all the time. They say, I'm sorry, we're not going to pay for that because it's not reasonable and necessary. They mean that it must be reasonable and necessary for a patient's specific condition and circumstances, and when you compare it to other treatment alternatives, primarily to the standard of care. This is hard for innovative devices and treatments to fit into this framework, because very often they're new, they're challenging the paradigm. And so the first part of this definition of being reasonable is sometimes challenging for CMS to understand. Why are we doing this a different way when there's the standard of care that looks completely opposite? And then necessary is also tricky because we have to have enough proof that says, no, you should try this new thing as opposed to this old tried and tested method. And just by the nature of something being new and innovative, it tends to have less research, less kind of weight of tradition behind it. So a very common reason that CMS will decide not to cover something is that they will call it investigational. And by that, they mean it's too new, we're not sure about it yet, we're not sure that it's reasonable and necessary. The third leg of the stool is payment. Again, CMS, as the largest payer, is the one that usually sets sort of the standard for payment, and all the other insurance companies use their payment as a reference. It actually depends where the patient is being treated, what the payment system looks like. So in the outpatient system in the US, it is very commonly a fee-for-service system. And this means that the way that the doctor makes more money is by providing more services. Every time he provides a service, he gets paid for that service. So you can see that the motivation in the outpatient setting is to use the most number of codes possible, so to provide the most number of services possible, and that's how they get the most payment. In the inpatient setting, typically patients are cared for under a prospective payment system or a bundled system. And this means that the hospital sort of anticipates the cost for that patient during their entire course of care. And they get paid one amount for that patient for their entire course of care. So they actually save money if they provide less services in the hospital setting. So they're trying to provide the bare minimum that they can get away with without affecting the patient's outcomes. So I call this the payment game. It really depends where you are in the system, which side of the game that you're playing. If you're in the outpatient system, you're providing the most services possible. If you're in the inpatient system, you're providing the least number of services possible in order to try to maximize your profit. So all of this kind of confusing system, I think, leads to some key questions that innovators need to make sure that they have the answers to before they offer their product on the market. The first question is, who is going to pay for this? And I think this is really important, and it has to do with where the care is happening. If the thing that you're building or the innovation that you have to offer is something that affects the care within the clinic, it's possible that they may just be affecting the practice expense or the overhead in order to take care of the patient, and it's not billed directly to the patient. In that case, the person who's paying for it is the provider or whoever is running the clinic. If the patient is going to be using this thing at home or in the community setting, and it's going to be their own individual device, then they probably will be paying for it through their medical benefit or their pharmacy benefit. That examples would be durable medical equipment and digital health products, things like a prosthetic or a sleep apnea machine or a glucose monitor. Those are paid for with a combination between the insurance company and the patient. The next question you have to ask yourself is, why would these people pay for this? So you have to prove that the value that you're offering aligns with the person who's paying for that value. So this is the quadruple aim, which is a quick way to sort of divide any benefit that is offered with a new change to the healthcare system. And it either lowers the cost of care, improves the staff experience, improves the patient experience, or improves the health outcomes. And if the thing that you're offering does one of those things, you have to make sure that the person who's benefiting is also the person who's paying. Otherwise, you have what's sometimes called the wrong pocket problem, which is that the money's coming out of the wrong pocket for the person who's benefiting. Next question you have to ask is, when will that person pay for this thing? So this is actually a screenshot from the coverage determination article from United Healthcare for a functional electric stimulation device that's used at home. And we're not going to read through it, but all you have to do is see how long it is. There are 16 different criteria items, and the patient must meet all of those things in order for the insurance company to decide that they will pay for it for that patient. And if even one of those things doesn't meet, then the patient has to pay for this themselves. The last thing you have to ask yourself is, how much are they going to pay for this? And it's important to ask this early in the development process, because you don't want to develop something that costs as much as an Apple Watch when the insurance company is only willing to pay for something like a Casio watch. How do you answer those questions? You have to do a little bit of homework. You have to sit and think a little bit about these questions and write these things down. For the who is going to pay for this question, you have to be able to thoroughly describe the setting and the workflow for the use of your product. And you have to be able to look for the existing coding structure. For the why and when will they pay question, you have to talk to the stakeholders, talk to the people who will be writing the check, and read the coverage determinations and figure out if there's already some writing around that particular product. And for the how much are they going to pay question, you can look at the CMS fee schedule, which is publicly available, and you can use that to gauge what the price will be. And with all of these things, you're checking the alignment of these things that you find out against your value proposition for your innovation. That's all that I have today. I'm going to stop sharing so we can move on to the next presentation. And please feel free to put your questions in the question and answer box, and I will answer them as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Smalley, for the presentation. It was highly informative, especially on the landscape to be considered when entering the reimbursement processes. So next up, we have Mr. Robin Toorneman. So Mr. Toonerman obtained a Master of Science in Health Economics, Policy and Law in 2017, and Master of Science in Drug Discovery and Safety in 2016. So in 2018, he co-founded MedScaler, an international health innovation platform where he's currently the operation director. From an early age, he has been fascinated by innovative technologies, especially in life sciences and health sector. He has a strong academic background and hands-on experience in innovating healthcare, particularly in MedTech and eHealth. With MedScaler, his aim is to bridge the gap between what is technologically possible and the actual daily use of innovative MedTech and digital technology in healthcare. Outside of work, he loves traveling to discover different cultures of the world. He also likes photography, which pair nicely with his traveling interests. Today, he will share his perspective on European market for medical devices and help us navigate this complex landscape. Over to you, Mr. Toonerman. Sorry, you're muted.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I see. Thank you, Shannon, for this introduction and for having me here today. It's a pleasure to present a little bit on the European perspective on the story that we just heard from Dr. Smalley. I am going to talk to you today about different types of reimbursement that we have here in Europe, and I will be sharing my perspective on how you should address that if you ever find yourself in the lucky position that you get to navigate kind of different countries here in the EU. Just to add a little bit about myself, I'm really a MedTech enthusiast, one could say. I've been passionate about healthcare since I was about 16. And for the last couple of years, I've been working mostly on the kind of business side of medical devices and digital health solutions. And I do that for MedScaler. We're a health innovation platform. Here are some of my colleagues. We work on kind of being the bridge between technology and doctors, physicians in daily clinical practice. By scouting technologies, validating them, researching them, and eventually, I think the most challenging step is to help them scale in different countries and to also scale up internationally, which is exactly kind of our expertise. These are some of the countries that we work in. So Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, as well as North America. However, today I'll be talking about the European perspective on things. And I always like to start with a little bit of interaction also, because I see there are 25 people present today, and I am curious what your kind of stance is on reimbursement in Europe. So my question to you all is, to your current knowledge, how do we go about reimbursement of digital health and innovative MedTech here in the EU? I hope you're familiar with MDR, the Medical Devices Regulation, which is kind of the European counterpart of FDA approval in the US. And if you would be also kind to use the chat function, if it's available, to give your answer, I'm curious to hear how you think. So if you have obtained EU MDR, you're automatically reimbursable in all European countries. You are reimbursable if you have MDR, but only in the public healthcare sector, you will be getting a reimbursement code. Answer C, even if you have EU MDR, you will have to file a separate application procedure at the EMA. Or finally, even if you have MDR, you'll have to go through separate reimbursement application processes in each country. So I see a couple of answers here. I have an A, C, 2 people typing D. I think currently 3 answers going for D, 2 for C, 1 for A. Anyone else wants to give it a try to solve this question? Another C. So I think there's kind of a equal number of people that think it's C versus D, which is very interesting. The correct answer would actually be answer D. And I think a lot of people are not 100% aware of that, especially when they're based out of the US, for example, or and they think Europe, you're also united. You have the MDR that kind of covers all European countries. And that is, since that's not the case, it's exactly why market entry here in Europe is so complex and expensive. Because we think we're kind of one EU looking at governed by the MDR, but I would say in reality the picture looks a little bit more like this. So even though we're one EU, we're extremely fragmented when it comes to reimbursement, right? So from a regulatory point of view, yes, when you have MDR, you're allowed to sell in a lot of European countries, but it doesn't automatically mean that you will also be reimbursable in those countries. And to just give you an example of what this looks like in reality in daily practice, so I think one of the very kind of internationally, or at least here in Europe, acknowledged reimbursement systems is in Germany. Who have adopted the DiGA, so it's kind of the Digital Healthcare Act, where instead of prescribing a medication, so the system is based on prescribing medication, you just go to the pharmacy, you pick up a box, and you take the meds. Actually, in Germany, doctors can now just prescribe a digital treatment as if it were a medication. And patients can start using that. There's a reimbursement code, it can get billed, there's an application process. So in that sense, if you qualify for the requirements of DiGA in Germany, you actually, you meet those quite intense requirements, you can get prescribed. In Belgium, for example, the situation is entirely different. So we also have something for digital health, but it's called the mHealth pyramid, and it doesn't work with DiGAs. Then in the UK, of course, the UK has left us, so probably there will be also a different regulatory system being implemented there. But there you have the NHS, which is also quite famous. And then in France, I haven't put a system there, but I've put Mr. Macron. He is talking a lot with Germany. He's considering kind of adopting the system of Germany to develop a French version of the DiGA. But you see that if I am a founder of a MedTech company, and often the truly innovative solutions come from like smaller companies or startup companies, if you will, and I need to navigate this landscape with limited resources, and in every country I need to knock on the doors of the regulatory authorities or the reimbursement authorities to actually be reimbursed, and in all countries, and that's of course the effect of this. In Germany, the reimbursement authorities will say, well, very interesting solution. Let's set up a trial with German clinical evidence. And then in France, they will say, well, let's do it with French patients. And in Belgium, maybe they will ask for Dutch or Belgian patients. So kind of the lack of harmonization in this, and the sometimes unwillingness to acknowledge clinical evidence from other countries for a reimbursement application is one of the things that makes it pretty challenging to scale up in Europe and rely on reimbursement for that scale up. I think this picture was kind of shown before also by Dr. Smalley. So if we zoom in on one individual country, so each country has their own healthcare system, which can be very, very different. You have a patient, provider, and payer, and in all countries that looks a little bit different. And usually there are a lot of different ways to actually get your innovation somewhere. So will it be paid for by the provider? Will it be an out-of-pocket expense for the patient? Or will it be covered directly by the payer? And each country has multiple routes to actually get an innovation into that system. So it's not always, there's not a single route that you can follow, but you really need to see what is my type of innovation and what is the kind of predetermined route for my innovation to be implemented or adopted in such a system. If you'd like to read more about that, because one of the challenges of my speech today is that it's 15 minutes, and I can actually talk even an hour about one European country, let alone cover the entire EU in 15 minutes. But we, in my day-to-day, I look at these healthcare systems, and sometimes I like to make things simple. So I write an article to kind of simplify the reimbursement landscape of one particular country. So should you be interested in learning more about the German healthcare system, I would refer you to one of my blogs where you can really read the details of the German healthcare system. And I will be also posting blogs about other countries. So as I mentioned, it's really important to discover or fill in what kind of solution you are. So even if you look at the digital health, you would just say, well, all healthcare that's digital or digitized would be digital health, and thus may be eligible for reimbursement under a digital healthcare reimbursement scheme. But I think, yeah, the opposite can be true. So you really have to see, where do I place my solution or innovation in the healthcare system? Will it be used by patients? So a really nice example that we have here is a company called Skin Vision, where patients can just download an app and they can scan moles, keep track of their moles on their skin. And they can, the app will advise patients whether they could potentially be turning into a form of skin cancer, or whether they should consult a physician. So if you have an app like that, which is freely accessible for patients, how are you going to get this reimbursed, right? It's on a national level, everybody can use it, type of prevention maybe. So that's very different from when you have a solution that is actually being prescribed by a doctor. So if I visit, you know, like a mental health care specialist, and they tell me you have a mild form of depression, we recommend you to follow this eHealth treatment to actually learn to cope with that. That is a very different setting than the one I just prescribed before. And then finally, there's a third kind of setting, which is where maybe my solution is just being used by doctors. So a very, I think, fast-growing type of innovation that does that would be artificial intelligence in medical imaging. It's just being placed in the hands of the radiologist, but it doesn't interact at all with patients. And also for this, maybe reimbursement wouldn't even be necessary. So I think that the key questions that you need to answer when you're trying to enter a European country is, first of all, do I really require reimbursement? So as I mentioned, if my solution is being used by a radiologist and not by patients, maybe there's a business case for the hospital to actually adopt my technology. So if they can do more radiology exams with the same number of staff within the same time, because I have this AI that makes it more efficient, well, why would I need reimbursement to build a positive business case for a hospital? And then if I need reimbursement, which rule applies to me? So what kind of solution am I? Am I a medical aid? Am I an AI? Am I a digital treatment? Am I a kind of new treatment for an inpatient setting? And then study what needs to be proven for your particular type of innovation. So how much clinical evidence do you need? How much safety data do you need? What certifications do you need? And also study how a regulatory agency or a reimbursement agency will actually look at that. So often you can find online the evaluation criteria. Then think about, okay, what happens after my solution has been evaluated? How will I get the feedback? Will it be positive? In many countries, you actually have more attempts. So even if the conclusion is negative, you can still improve. And what happens after? I think a lot of people see reimbursement as the holy grail. But if you have a reimbursement code and you are never prescribed by physicians, is that then the success story? Yes, you're on the list, but no, you're not being used. So it's not the end of the journey. I would say it's a significant part of the journey, but every end is a new start. And here definitely the start of pushing your solution further into the healthcare system starts. Because frankly, reimbursement codes that are not utilized or underutilized may also be taken off the list of reimbursement. And I think this is where there's plenty of room for harmonization, which is a bright outlook that I have on the future, where actually in the future, perhaps if you get reimbursed in Germany, then there will be a mutual recognition in France, in Belgium, in the Netherlands that say, okay, we trust the system that you have to evaluate. And we believe that if it is available in Germany, it should also be available in France without any other application process. So this is really something that would be a very big leap forward, if you ask me. One of the tools that we use to evaluate the impact of an innovation is the Health Innovation Impact Tool. And I'm going to just really show that super briefly. We call it a beer coaster approach. So again, we like to simplify things, but this is really to study the effect on different stakeholders. So I think Dr. Smalley mentioned something similar. Per stakeholder involved with your innovation, you need to see if their input and their outcomes are aligned. So sometimes it's the case that a provider, for example, needs to invest a lot. So in this case, we're talking about a simple thing such as eHealth. So often it's the case that if you use remote monitoring or eHealth, yes, there's reimbursement, but often the reimbursement rates are lower than the rates for an inpatient visit or visit to an outpatient center. So what is then the incentive for providers to actually switch to that digital solution if that means that they will be able to bill less? And this is where you really need to sit together with all stakeholders, maybe adopt a system of value-based healthcare to actually bring these types of innovations to market. And each market is different, but each market also misses something. So what I just mentioned, how do you go about it if a healthcare professional loses money? There's no easy answer for that, and it will differ per country. And how do you go about solutions for prevention? So the solution that I just mentioned to prevent skin cancer by checking your moles, this has been a really intense journey of talking to so many different stakeholders to make this available to patients. And think about also which markets are you looking at? So if you fly out to Germany, you land in Munich, you say, oh, we want to enter the German market. There will be a German expert telling you how to, arrange things in Germany. But maybe the Netherlands or maybe France would have been a really much easier market for your solution from a regulatory point of view or a reimbursement point of view. So this is something that I think everybody should consider. What will be my beachhead market in Europe, and in which order will I be scaling up my solution throughout Europe? So that was the end of my story. I'm sorry I took a couple of minutes more than I was supposed to, but I hope it's been a little bit helpful in understanding the European ecosystem, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Mr. Toonerman, for the overview on the European market. Yeah, I think you cover quite a lot for such a short period of time. I've learned a lot.
That's my best.
Yeah, thanks also for clarifying the specifics within the major countries in Europe. I think we can use also to the advantage, as you mentioned at the end, if you were aware of that. And also the health innovation impact tool, I think is a very helpful start, like to see whether the different stakeholders are aligned. So yeah, thanks for the presentation. And now we will open for Q&A with both of our speakers, Mr. Toorneman, Dr. Smalley.
Yes.
So
yes, Daniela. I think we have few good questions from the Q&A section already. I think one of the attendees asked, I think this is a good question. During the pandemic, there was a big shift towards telemedicine and digital health. So how are these services actually covered? Are there any specific mechanism implemented to absorb all these solutions in digital health? I think Dr. Smalley provided a very good answer, but that would be on the US perspective. But maybe Mr. Toonerman, you can also share a point of view as well regarding this question.
Yeah, certainly. I think also here in many European countries, we have witnessed a major shift towards digital healthcare. And I think the most important outcomes are, first of all, that physicians have noticed that they can actually treat patients digitally. And the second thing that we have noticed is that a lot of payers, so in Europe, we're talking about health insurance companies mostly, or even national healthcare systems in the UK, they have seen that actually health outcomes do not deteriorate and that it's not scary to reimburse digital care. So where before, I think we were very anxious by reimbursing digital physical therapy, because how can one treat someone over the phone or over a video connection? Now that has been all let go, and there are many more options to get reimbursed, I think both in the US and in Europe. But still, yeah, in every country that will be different. So it's very good to analyze in which country the reimbursement rules are favorable towards your specific type of digital solution, I would say.
Thanks, Mr. Toonerman. I think that's a good answer as well. Daniela, maybe you can also go through some of the questions. I think there are some questions that are still unanswered in the Q&A box. Maybe we can get some answer from Mr. Robin Toorneman and also Dr. Angela Smalley.
Yeah, so yeah, I want to know whether Dr. Smalley had anything to add. I know you answer by like typing, but if you can just mention, yeah.
Yeah, one of the major things that happened in the US healthcare system was they opened up all of the traditional codes that cover therapy to be provided virtually during the pandemic. And they were paid at the same amount, whether the patient was in your office or whether they were at home and you were just providing them, virtual treatment. That was a temporary measure, but it's been a very popular one. And so there is some legislation in place to extend that coverage past the pandemic era. So this is evolving, as we speak, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It has opened the door for a lot of innovators who are building digital health solutions to think of a way that their solution could be covered. Because before that, there actually was not a good coverage category for digital health innovation within the US. So this is new and we're still getting used to it, but it looks like it may be a permanent solution for us.
Okay, yeah, thanks both of you. We'll get one that's, I imagine that this is a very frequent question you get. What would be the time to get a medical device reimbursed? So to this, maybe Dr. Smalley can start.
Yeah, to get a new code actually doesn't take very long. If you have all of everything lined up and ready to go, it can take a couple of months. But actually to get reliable, complete coverage can take years of gathering data and proving to the insurance companies that they should cover this on a regular basis. That's one of the reasons why I always say that it's really never too early to start thinking about the reimbursement for your product. If it's going to take you a couple of years to develop the prototypes and to think through the technical aspect of the product, you can start thinking about reimbursement right at that very beginning stage. Maybe you just only have a sketch of your product on a napkin, and that's still not too early to think about reimbursement. Reimbursement might be the thing that makes you decide to change the features of your product to fit into the system a little bit better. So that's why I say don't wait until you've got the thing already developed and ready to hand to patients. Really let the reimbursement inform the development process.
Mr. Toonerman, do you have anything to add on to this?
Yeah, I really agree on the starting early that Dr. Smalley mentioned, where the reimbursement outcome that you want to achieve can kind of feed into the design and development of the product. And I think it was a question of it just disappeared in front of my eyes. But the question was, of course, like, how long does it take? I think there are a lot of factors that play into that. So first of all, if I am a really simple digital device and maybe I digitize a treatment that has been for many years adopted into the standard of care, then it's going to be a lot simpler than when I like develop a very novel kind of class 3 high risk device, which will not only take me 10 years to develop, but then also there will be huge clinical trials needed to first, see if it's effective for which subset of patients, and then also see if it's cost effective. And that would be, then you're looking at timelines from indeed 5 to 10 years before that has like fully penetrated the center of care. I think if you want to like move fast, I'd say start small, which is, it's going to sound cliche, but it's actually true, especially, also in countries like Germany, where you have public health insurance companies and private health insurance companies. You can actually also negotiate with them outside of the reimbursement codes. So you could say, well, if one health insurer wants to market itself as more innovative, or it has a specific demography of patients where they would have special interest in a particular type of innovation, you can start with them and just make bilateral agreements that are kind of outside of the standard coding system. So then you can start small, you can gather evidence, you get paid, right? Also important for entrepreneurs. And then in the years that follow, you can actually gather more evidence and work towards like more structural reimbursement. So if you start small, it can be a lot faster and kind of under 1 or 2 years, if you will.
Thanks, Robin. I think we have one last question from Ashraf that he's asking, it seems that getting a reimbursement for a new healthcare tech device in Europe is quite challenging, especially if you're considering each country requirements. They have separate requirements, right? Are there a group of countries in Europe that like they have similar healthcare systems, or are there countries that are easier to introduce products to?
That is a very good question, Ashraf. I'd say Definitely, there are countries where it's more difficult, right? So we often believe the Germans, and I can say this, I'm half German, but they're extremely critical when it comes to, like privacy, when it comes to medical efficiency. So often we think, well, if you manage to succeed in Germany and you've achieved like the highest possible, then other countries can only be easier. Do you then start with Germany? I wouldn't recommend that per se, but I would really look at, there are definitely countries where digital health is more embraced and like further developed, such as the Scandinavian countries, the Netherlands. So that's something to take into account. And then also investigate, maybe some European countries will have a particular interest in an innovation. So not all healthcare systems are the same. And if there is like kind of, I don't know, a national innovation program looking to improve mental health care, or maybe there's something about women's health that is in a particular country on the agenda, then those things can actually help you to enter that country quicker. So before just going somewhere, we really recommend looking at different countries because they're all very different. And as I mentioned, I hope they'll be a little bit more harmonized in the future. But definitely some systems are more alike than others, right? So the Netherlands and Germany, they both use kind of DRG codes, whereas in the NHS, the systems are kind of organized a little bit differently. And I'm really not an expert on many countries in Southern Europe. So for example, I know in Italy, there's a lot of fragmentation where even a municipality or kind of a region can decide for themselves if they want to reimburse something. That makes it, of course, much more difficult than a country where that's a little bit more coordinated. How is that in the US per state? I know there's like state law. How does that kind of feed into the speed of reimbursement for a particular product per state?
It's typically a national decision at the CMS level, but per state, the coverage for Medicaid is on a state-by-state basis. And it really it's determined on the politics of that state, whether they are open for larger amounts of public coverage or lesser amounts. So there are definitely some states in the US that are more open to healthcare innovation on a state-by-state basis. A good example is Massachusetts. Tends to be pretty friendly to new treatments, and that's because it's a hot seat of MedTech innovation. So those insurance companies are used to being approached with new products and ideas.
Yeah, it's interesting. Does that mean everybody starts in Massachusetts, or is that kind of a well-kept secret for the insiders?
I think it is common for people to start in Massachusetts or New England in general, yep, and expand out from there.
Interesting.
Yeah, thanks all. I think it's very interesting because it's also taps into the like culture, like ethics and like so many aspects that's beyond only the regulatory. And once you can get that step into the door, it facilitates the scaling up. So yeah, thanks for the session. I'm gonna wrap up. Thanks everybody like for joining us. We hope you enjoy and learn from the expert on today's panel. Before we conclude the session today, we would like to bring your attention to this poster presentation. We have the QR code that leads you to the registration of our next webinar. That's going to be next week, right? So yeah, thank you for your time. For now, goodbye, stay safe, and we look forward to see you next week as we talk to our panelists on the venture capital and strategies. So yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Angela.